Yeah, back in about 2018, when I first went to remote first work, I did what any logical person would do. I moved to Florida. So this is a screenshot of the weather pattern during the winter area the first year that I moved to Florida. So nearby where I lived, there was a park. It's called North Shore Park. And I rode my bike down there every morning, but we went down there pretty regular. There's a lot of cool nature stuff in Florida. So depending on where you go, there's just nature everywhere. But we went to North Shore Park pretty regularly. And while you're there walking around on the boardwalk, there's a little boardwalk that runs next to the water all around the park. You tend to see a lot of cool stuff, like stingrays and dolphins, different stuff like that. Now, rays. I don't know if they're stingrays. But one of the things that you see when you're walking around this boardwalk is a fence structure at the beginning of every dock. So if you're from somewhere on the coast, you may know what these are, but generally people don't. And when I first saw them, I didn't. But I like to take pictures of a lot of stuff when I'm walking around so I can use them for stuff like this. So you can get an idea from these that there's some sort of general security involved. Something is telling these people that they have to do a certain thing. And it looks like keeping people off of their docks. So this seems like sort of effective. Like you could still get around it, but probably effective. But then you start to see some other ones that are a bit different. They still follow the same general guidelines you can imagine, but effectiveness may vary. But it's still like, I don't know, still meets the criteria for a while. And then you see some other ones that are, I guess, meeting the same criteria if you look higher, but as far as effectiveness, you start to wonder, like, what is the general thing that is desired here? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? What's the reasoning behind it? And there are more of these that are, generally less effective. So you try to figure out, like, what's the actual purpose behind these things? So we don't know what was told to these people, but we see varying levels of how it was received, and that's part of the thing. So you can imagine like they're like confidently giving good feedback in ways that isn't misunderstood. And being able to even find the message in things like constructive criticism and being able to show things like constructive criticism, like you're thankful for those things, like being able to accept a compliment or give a compliment and make sure people are heard. Like some of the things happen, but varying degrees of effectiveness because of things being misunderstood along the way. Because we aren't really trained to be like individual. We're trained to be like generous, successful because like, people need steps. People want reassurance and process. But when you give a broad message, it doesn't tend to have very specific results. Broad messages have broad results. General messages have general results. So you end up with a percentage of people who receive these messages, like a percentage of success, which is okay in general, but is not what I would call successful. Like if you look at some of those pictures, it's not received the same way, but it's easier to teach a group in those ways. So with taking feedback in general, like I like to get feedback. I like people to tell me the things that can be improved. I like, sometimes I don't get to act very quickly, but, I like to get feed I'd rather get it than not get it and something come later. So as an example, I got some feedback from someone. It was sort of like, don't jump to like a solution. So I found that sometimes I needed to circle around to get to the final part of an interaction. Like I would just go right to it. Uh, so it was indicated that that was like generally fine because at the time I was senior leadership, and senior leads have like more experience and more context of things that are going on. So it kind of took a while for me to get to the root of what was going on. And I realized it's because I was going into these meetings with like making it about me. So I wanted to solve problems. I wanted to be helpful. I wanted to show that I could help. But I wasn't allowing people time to like communicate and create context. I wasn't letting them participate. So I wasn't coming into these with a giving mindset. Also, like I got some feedback on the process I was working with one time. But is on a certain type of meeting that I was hosting. And so the very next meeting, it went well. And when I asked for feedback, someone mentioned that I should change like the very same thing that I just responded to feedback. They pretty much change it back to the way it was. So I knew that wouldn't work from previous experience, but I still thank that person for the feedback. So I did figure out through all that another change that I can make to incorporate it. So I had a similar impact of what they were telling me, even though the process was a little bit different. So we still reached the goal. So in this case, it doesn't really matter specifically what that feedback was. It's just that like it was contrary to what I knew would work. But in that time, I didn't like explain the actions. I didn't explain the previous feedback or the thought process or anything that led up to that. I just thanked that person for the feedback that they did give me. I told them it was interesting because I gotten some other feedback on the same process, and it's stuff that I'd already been working on. So that was another situation. And then, um, so I was in a meeting, and the day before, I'd been like meeting hopping. So I came into this specific meeting late, but I already just sort of had that covered because I knew I was going to be late, but I still felt like wasn't giving my best. And I didn't really have anything planned, so I just decided to practice like a fun little system that I'd intended to use later for a workshop. So I just kind of like fell into this meeting and winged it, and it went well. No, in general, but I knew like personally I didn't do my best. So I felt like I owed that specific team more. So the message that I received after this was like thanking me for my leadership. So I had made some impact on this group of people that I didn't even notice during the meeting, which to me, these kind of feedbacks are strong. So like I got kind of emotional, not like crying or anything, but um, so I just had to kind of experience that for for a while. And I started thinking like maybe I didn't deserve that, especially since I had been meeting hopping. So I started thinking like to these people, I'm more of a peer than a leader. And like I'm just there trying to help these people. Then I thought after that, I thought maybe I should thank him and just tell him how hard I'd been working on that specific a couple of specific things. Um, but I still waited. And eventually I was able to actually accept the compliment. I'm not the best with compliments or even like positive feedback, not just compliments. Um, and I had to realize that the things that I was saying, like that's what makes me. leader. And it's okay to be proud and passionate about it. Um, but this was about appreciation and telling me that my hard work paid off. So my job in this situation is just to be thanked. So what I actually did was respond in a way that was like a little bit too formal because I wanted to respond. Um, and uh, then I followed up after that with another message and like explaining myself. So you could take from that situation whatever you want. But the point is that I kind of wrestled with that. But my job in that situation was to be thank. So that's the thing. Like, how do we get there? How do we get to be patient? And how do we find like the impact when sometimes when the feedback we're receiving seems contradicting to what we think, and we're not really taught generally how to respond to these things. It's implied that we're supposed to like explain our wrongdoings, and that's what we usually tend to do. We explain, which is like getting defensive. And if we're taught anything at all, it's just generally to thank them, but we're not really taught like what that means or how to follow up on that. And that's the point. Like receiving feedback is about giving. So you're making it about appreciation and not about your actions. Sometimes that means not getting defensive or not over explaining. And sometimes that means in a compliment situation, like accepting a compliment without going on talking about all of your own actions and things that led up to that. Well, that's the thing. We're not really taught how to take feedback. We're just expected to like act to show some kind of improvement in that highlighted area. And that's reinforced in us ever since school, most entry level jobs, and just about anywhere that will measure performance. If someone tells you that something needs improved, you work on that thing and improve it. I work with a lot of introverted people, especially the ones that start to become successful. You hear things like I had one of my reports. They're hearing a lot of feedback. Oh, you should be more outgoing, like everyone that you interact with likes you. I had another report who came to me. It was a manager, and there was like, I need to be more confident and to share my ideas. And the thought process in both of those things were, no matter how I feel, I'm just gonna jump out there and do it. So I don't know like what kind of success rate that would have. Uh, So that's the thing. We're taught what to do. We know to work on those things. We're not really taught how to do it. We're given these like general specifications, and they're not always successful in those individual situations. You have to take the personality of these people into account. And that means you have to take your own personality into account to interact with them. So it's not hard. It's just about caring about the people you're interacting with. It's about finding what the point of that feedback was. So an introverted person who is wanting to share their ideas more, they're not necessarily able to just go out, share the ideas more. And they may or may not have success if they just bite the bullet and do it. But a lot of times these people need more time to think or need things to slow down. So in those cases, what I've taught those people is how to use questions to maybe the person who's supposed to share the ideas more. Maybe they need to ask questions of people in the room to get a little more context, get a little more information, to feel more comfortable about the idea that they're going to share. Doing that also slows the conversation down. So it appears to other people like they're interacting more, but they're still getting what they need. Whereas if they just jump, like you don't know if that will or will not be successful, or they may always have the exact same anxiety that they always had and they're just doing it anyway. When you want to make people feel heard also. So a lot of times it's just say thank you. When it's about um, that's just about what most of us are generally taught. That's it. Just thanks. It is a really good start, but you have to know how to mean that, how to show that you mean that. If you want to make people feel heard, you have to make sure that you're listening to the people. So you have to create a way for them to have a voice. And that may be in an open environment, that may be one on ones, that may be a survey, but just generally getting a people a way to speak in whatever context you're in. And then you have to do work with that. You have to make sure that you're somehow processing that feedback, and you have to keep people updated so that they know what's going on. They know there's process going on. They know if there's success or wherever the case is. So when feedback is useful, then you can circle back and tell that person, and you can thank them again for the feedback. And some successes with that is very important when people feel like they're being heard. So you can describe what changes happened and how that specific feedback was helpful. And this could be like individually, or this could be in a group, but you need to do something to show progress and appreciation for feedback. When you can't, the big thing is you can't make people feel heard if you're not listening. Generally, if you ask people one thing they like about me, it's usually that I'm direct. You hear people say I'm good at making other people comfortable. Maybe that I'm empathetic. Hopefully that I'm empathetic, but most of the time it's that I'm direct. I give people feedback because people generally want to hear feedback. And I am very direct, but I'm also not mean. And I don't think I tend to make people feel bad in the way that I give them feedback. And it doesn't bother me to be direct because I see that as a responsibility. That's another thing we're not taught to do. We're not taught to give people feedback. Some people aren't good at it, which is why it's important to know how to receive it. In fact, we're sometimes taught the opposite. We're usually taught what I like to call the sandwich, the compliment sandwich. So you say something good about the person, then you give the feedback that you want to give. And then you either say something good after or give some sort of redirect, which pretty much erases the feedback that you gave, but makes everybody kind of feel good in general. Yeah, the problem is that you can't be sure that your feedback has been received in that way. You can't be sure that expectations are now clear. And it's not fair to hold people accountable to unclear expectations. So you need to make sure that your feedback is given directly. And then you confirm before the conversation moves along that that person has received like that feedback. And we're also not really taught well how to compliment people. Um, just like thanks or you're awesome. You're doing good. I appreciate you. And like those are all great. But in both cases, like you can use the same model if you don't have any idea. It's the behavior plus impact. And that's generally the model that gets put in these other like wrapped up models that they teach in whatever management trainings. The behavior plus impact. Like when you do this, this is the outcome. So that it works for both constructive criticism, that's like that feedback that needs to be taken right away. That's positive feedback, behavior plus impact. And you can be direct. You just have to use like empathy. So one of the books I tend to recommend is Radical Candor. So that's giving you more on how to give feedback and feedback in general. Although one thing that can be misunderstood with that book is it's pretty direct. So the difference between brutal honesty and candor tends to be empathy. So lately I've been recommending Crucial Conversations instead because it's more directly about having conversations and it's less likely to be misunderstood than Radical Candor. But Radical Candor is a pretty good follow up in general. So, what you want to do, you want to find the message in what people are saying. And it doesn't mean how they say it. So, a lot of people are not good about this whole feedback thing in general. So, if you work on it and you get training, you're going to be better, but that doesn't make everyone else better. So, you have to react calmly. You have to be patient. So you don't like react quickly based on the face value thing. Sometimes you need to make sure you've processed it well. Like that pause between feeling and action is where the change happens. And like it's being able to give other people feedback and not worrying about being able to be misunderstood, not worrying about what their fence is going to look like. So you want to be clear. One is acts, it's like asking for feedback and truly wanting to hear it and improve. When you do that, you'll get context when you get the feedback to make sure that it's understood. And it's also about making people feel heard and creating an environment of general candor, of culture. So through these repetitive actions, this is how it works. It's how we make culture. So what do we do? How do we get to the place where feedback is easy and it works? How do we get to where it's in that culture? When you're taking feedback, don't be defensive. Don't over explain. You can clarify for sure, but so long as you're not being defensive. So you take that feedback and figure out how to incorporate it, whether it's a process or your personality or how you interact with people. You try to find a way to make that fit. And if it doesn't, you don't just discount it. Just wait and really see if it fits. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it's the point is to try. And when you're giving feedback, you be just that. Be giving. You're either helping someone or you're thanking someone. And it can't get accomplished if you're not clear. And when you're dealing with people, especially as a manager, uh, you need to always make sure that that person is hurt. That it's the same responsibility as giving feedback to make sure that people are hurt. And this isn't a thing that's going to happen overnight, building culture, even building your own habits. But it's something you can get better at with practice. It's an easy process, but it takes a little work to get it right. And if you figure out how to do it effortlessly, then let everybody know. But until then, we just need to be diligent. We need to be helpful. We need to try to be good.